Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Level 1 News. Today is January 25th. And we have really large sections this week, so the breakdown's going to be a little bit strange. I think today is just government and then like two teeny little stories about robots.
It's a robot government sandwich. It's weird. We have one robot story, which is a good lead into our first government story.
It's not. Oh yeah, I guess it is kind of, but it's like very thin. It's more like crackers instead of bread. Also, you may notice Ryan's not here. His heat went out.
His heat died. He's frozen.
Yeah, which kind of sucks. So he's got someone looking at it right now. So we're doing the news with just two today.
He's even more salty than usual.
Yeah, he's kind of losing it.
All right, our first story.
Oh, Elon Musk's brain implant company is inching toward human trials. This is one of our robot stories. It's not really it's kind of robot-esque.
It's Neuralink. Remember Neuralink? It's the Elon Musk quote where he said, "Well, the monkeys aren't unhappy,"
which isn't like a glowing endorsement. They're looking to maybe start human trials soon. I think they have job postings up on their website, which people are speculating is because they are preparing to get the FDA involved.
It seems likely that one of the first human trials will be, somebody who is in a vegetative state, or somebody that the hospital otherwise, they're just completely paralyzed and they have no ability to communicate. It's like, all right, let's put this in and see what happens. It's going to be really horrifying if it turns out that person was conscious and awake the entire time they've been laying in the bed.
There's a word, it's locked-in syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm terrified of that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of mixed on the Neuralink stuff, because on one hand, it sounds like it could be a really good thing for people who have that sort of syndrome, but it's also, what are the horrifying dystopian realities of what that's going to turn into, like advertising directly in your brain?
Well, it'll turn into a competitive thing first. The people that get that will have to have it, and they will have way better ability to do certain kinds of jobs. And then either the value in doing those jobs goes way down, or it becomes basically that you have to have an implant in order to
compete.
Yeah, whatever that job is, until eventually everybody has to have it. But whether we get there in 1 or 100 years.
Once again, Gattaca.
Yeah, and our second story.
Let's take a drink. Felony charges are first in a fatal crash involving Autopilot. This is kind of two stories, right? Like we had 2 copies of this story, I think, in our list.
Yeah, we've got Tesla on Autopilot killed 2 people in Gardenia.
Is the driver guilty of manslaughter? Wendell, you were pretty damning of this. You were like, yeah, he is.
Yeah, Autopilot is not automatic pilot.
I don't think anyone is questioning whether he's guilty, though the guy is out on bail, which is crazy. He killed 2 people. I think the question is, like, is Tesla and other people who are claiming Autopilot and branding it in such a way, is there any liability for them in addition to the liability to the guy?
Tiny little bit for misrepresenting that. It's like, look how good this is. But every time you start the car, every time you do anything, there's all of the appropriate legal disclaimers. I'm sure that the Tesla lawyers have adequately insulated things.
The standout, the boiler snake has thoughts about that. It is a very cold day here, so he'll be probably chiming in a lot. The thing that really stood out to me in this story was that there was just one little sentence, and it mentioned Tesla no longer has a media department. And I was like, is that smart? They kind of need the PR, any PR boost they can get that's outside of Musk. But
they'll bring it back once they finish the move to Texas. They're moving to California, remember, because California was being too weird about the whole shutdown thing.
They want us to take care of our workers, and they don't like it that they're working in 100-degree heat.
It's a dry heat. It should be fine.
It'll be fine.
No, it's not fine. Speaking of things that are not fine.
This is a strange. FedEx asks FAA to let it install anti-missile lasers on its cargo planes. I missed the details of this story.
It turns out that, in certain countries, the cargo planes that fly overhead, it's like a giant aluminum piñata. And so if you shoot it down, you get all these wonderful presents and supplies, and
Christmas comes early.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I'm pretty sure that we saw this in movies like Mad Max and RoboCop and other things like that, where the train just defends itself.
Well, we literally just did a story last week, I guess, about trains that were being looted in California. So, maybe this is just the next step, right? You just install lasers.
I can't wait for the AI robots that automatically administer less than lethal countermeasures for the people that are trying to cause problems.
We promise there's a happy story at the very end of this episode if you just hold on a little longer.
Also involving robots. Oh, this is a fun one.
The FTC is reportedly investigating Meta VR's division for antitrust violations. Surprising no one.
So Meta, VR, Oculus, it's Facebook. Facebook VR, these are things that happen before Meta and before the metaverse, which is the reason for the rebranding. It's just saying, hey, wait, are you locking people into things? And the answer is yeah.
Yeah.
This is just good old Miss Lena Khan doing fun, exciting things.
You have to have a Facebook account to use this VR headset.
Yeah. Our next story is really, there's a lot more going on here, I think. History will know in 3 to 6 months if this was right, but we'll see.
FSB arrests REvil ransomware gang members.
So this was the Russian Federal Security Service said today that it has raided and shut down the operations of the REvil ransomware gang. This was an international effort. There was coordination between U.S. and Russian teams. My read of this is that there is some undertones here that is basically we're doing some stuff in some other parts of Europe, and we are more than happy to cooperate with your law enforcement investigation. But if you don't like what we're doing in other parts of Russia, we're not going to cooperate with you. Other parts of Europe, it's like we're not going to cooperate anymore. So this is the Kaseya attack. Remember that? You know, the really big hack. And so there's some messaging here maybe that this kind of international cooperation wouldn't happen if there's an international incident involving the borders of another country. That's a little, I don't know.
That does seem to be getting worse, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know anything about that situation fully, but it seems like every other day there's another headline that's like...
Yeah, it's like I read the headline.
More troops by the border.
And then I thought about it, and it's like the timing of this is very suspect.
Yeah.
Very, very suspect.
I didn't even make that connection.
They hope that you don't, you know.
Yeah, but when you think about it, it's like, oh, that kind of feels icky, doesn't it?
Another piece of news where they hope that you don't make a connection.
Democrats unveil bill to ban online surveillance advertising.
So the headline also, there were also 5 Republicans that supported this. So if you go read the bill, which I would encourage you to do, this really just bans tracker-based advertisement. But get a load of this. It doesn't ban these mega corporations buying your purchase history and colluding on that. So like your credit card purchase history, and you have an account to log into whatever and do whatever on the website. It doesn't ban
email mailing lists, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't like if Google and Visa want to get together and share everything that they know about you, this doesn't ban that.
I mean, that's a step in the right direction, but I wonder if it was like hamstrung at all, where maybe they proposed something more intense and then it was like, well, we'll just do this.
It's really just they want to make it so that Facebook, like, remember when we did the stories where you could, like, you want to sell your house in a really upscale neighborhood. This is a thing that happens apparently. I don't know. This seems crazy to me because, you know, we're not in an area of the country that this is that's this.
It's not an opulent area, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was like, I've got my $4 million villa. I'm going to go on Facebook and going to take out an ad, and I'm filling out the check boxes, and it's basically like, I want to show this ad to wealthy people that live in this area, also no black people. Oh. And Facebook was like, yeah, that sounds great. We'll let you advertise with that. So this bill is to really just try to stop those protected classes from being any kind of a category. So it doesn't actually stop surveillance advertising. It really just juices up the penalties if you're caught dealing with some of those protected classes where somebody could actually take out an ad that says don't advertise to black people.
An improvement, but maybe not as far as it could have gone.
Now, if they want to base whether or not to show you something on your your purchase history or something just incredibly invasive, your medical history, I mean, there's not really, yeah. Well, it depends on what you voluntarily give up, but yeah, you get into some really dark scenarios with that. So you should really read the bill because it's disappointing because it sounds good and then you read it and it's just...
It's like, well, that's better, but couldn't we do even better? No.
And then going to the European Union, man, there is some stuff happening in Europe the UK and the EU.
Did it seem like this article was trying to spin this in a really positive light?
Yes.
Okay,
I
was like,
trying to spin this in a positive
this seems
way.
like this would be bad, but
Yeah, no.
EU wants to build its own DNS infrastructure with built-in filtering capabilities. That last part is what's like the ding 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 red flag.
Yeah, you dirty hippies, and you're accessing. You're not accessing the allowed narrative. You're downloading pirated content and doing naughty things.
You're reading permies.com.
Yeah,
Permaculture gardening.
YouTube DL. Oh, we'll talk about that in the business section. But it's like we need to block YouTube DL at the country level, at the European Union level, because your YouTube DL interferes with profits. Even though we make people pay money to license all forms of media, and they have a right to private copying, but we need to shut down YouTube DL.
That's what it's really about.
Yeah.
In theory, well, the way they kind of talk about it in the article, they're like, oh, it would give EU more independence, and I was like, well, that sounds good, and then I was like, but you're still trying to control the internet, and the flow of information, which is a negative.
It's not the European Union has a coalition to create DNS. It's the European Union has a coalition to create DNS and will block all alternatives.
Yeah. It's so sad.
Yeah. Switching gears.
Chinese regulator denies issuing guidelines on internet giants' investments and fundraisings.
So, okay. I mean, I guess this is a fun story, but it's like such rules would intensify the oversight from China's increasingly assertive regulators who've, over the past year, informally freewheeling internet giants in areas for deal-making or handling of user data. So this is, like, formally they didn't issue...
Oh.
What's going
on?
Formally, they didn't issue guidelines, but there was definitely a wink and a nod. So, there you go.
China's trying to control things, but so is the U.S.
Yeah, look at this.
U.S. examining Alibaba's cloud unit to determine whether it poses a national security risk, Reuters, citing sources.
Yeah, the Biden administration is reviewing e-commerce giant Alibaba's cloud business to determine whether it poses U.S. risk to national security, according to 3 people briefed on the matter. It's like, okay, how would it interfere with U.S. national security? Well, companies could buy hosting there. This company could offer hosting that's cheaper than market rates, which might attract U.S. customers, and then
they all go down.
Yeah, or
abruptly.
Information is lost, or data is exfiltrated, or whatever. It's hard to say. It's hard to say, but we'll keep that in mind as we come back to that. There was also this that happened in the UK. This is also really big news.
The most unflattering picture they could have picked of him. Revealed, UK government plans publicity blitz to undermine privacy of your chats.
So the UK has it in mind again that they really need to block end-to-end encryption. They want to be able to snoop on everything. And so they're planning a media campaign where they're going to say, think of the children. We really need this. We really need these law enforcement powers, because it's a deeply unpopular idea. Like the UK citizenry are not all complete morons. So they understand.
The ad campaign's just going to be like pictures of text bubbles, and it's like an adult telling a kid to send nudes or something, and then it'll be like, do you want your kid to be part of this? Wouldn't you want to know? Yeah.
Having strong encryption is as important for a society's digital health as not having all of your potable water go through lead pipes is for physical health. It's like, oh, we really want to block end-to-end encryption the way that we want to block water pipes made of materials other than lead.
Do you think the social media people and the designers on this, do you think they're excited about this project?
No, I think they're probably just, it's
going to be really mediocre work.
Yeah. I got to eat.
Yeah.
Please just give me money. I got to eat. So it's like they've hired a high-end ad agency to mobilize public opinion about it. I really hope that this campaign goes so well that there are enough clued-in people in the UK that it severely cripples this ad agency's clientele. And in fact, if you have there's some really high rollers in the Level 1 audience. So if you use this ad agency, or your company does, maybe find another ad agency.
We know they're desperate because they're working with this initiative, but make it worse for them.
There is no scenario in which protect the children and outlawing end-to-end encryption, those things actually make sense. And it just so happens that you can use the lack of end-to-end encryption to do other things. We've covered it here before. The US, the UK, Australia, and Germany, and another country are part of this Five Eyes network, where it's like US citizens or the U.S. government is not technically allowed under the law to spy on U.S. citizens, but it's easy to get around that. You can ask your German friends to spy, and similarly, it's like the German government is not supposed to, by law, spy on German citizens.
It's a third party, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And here we are. Here's a Forbes article, if you don't believe me.
WhatsApp ordered to help U.S. agents spy on Chinese phones. No explanation required. Let's explain that.
Yeah, they're not. Now, China's not one of the Five Eyes countries. They're not. We're not sharing data with China. It's Russia, and maybe some other countries that are doing that side of it. But the U.S. and the U.K. and Germany and Australia, we share data. New Zealand, we share a lot of data about stuff that's going on. So it's really interesting that the argument here is like, well, hey, these Chinese phones, they're not U.S. citizens because they're Chinese phones. Well, let's just spy on all of them. They don't have any rights as U.S. citizens. So it's like, well, there's a human rights component to this, isn't there?
But they're humans, though. No.
So you can read about this on Forbes because everybody's doing it. And this is why all the governments of the world really don't like end-to-end encryption, because if it's done well, it can interfere with this kind of spying. Why do the governments need this kind of spying?
Because they need to know everything all the time, even if it creates so many false leads that they can't follow up on all of them.
Now, if you're outside the U.S. and you're saying, ha ha ha, Forbes, U.S. institution, the BBC would like a word.
Winter Olympics, athletes advised to use burner phones in Beijing.
Are you connecting the dots yet? Really? I mean, come on. Connect the dots.
I do love that story, though. Do you think that the Olympic Committee for your country has to pay for the burner phones, or do you have to pay for that out of pocket?
No, you got to pay for that out of pocket yourself. Yeah.
That's an expensive data plan, too.
Yeah, and it's like, it's like these are the world's superpowers that are having a spat. What about other countries? Well, I guess it's bad news.
Israeli citizens targeted by police using Pegasus spyware, report claims.
So were these, terrorists? It's not looking that way. Looks like they were journalists. Some activists, but that had not had a history of any kind of violence or, activism in the sense of let's all come together and try to stop, murdering people and having extrajudicial things and that kind of thing. It's like, oh, we can't have that level of
It's probably
activism.
just like basic stuff like labor rights, like let's have a strike or something. And they're like, no. That's not happening.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, Wouldn't all the countries are really, really worried about a Zebellion?
Oh yeah, did you read that? I don't think we included that because it's an old article, but there was apparently the Pentagon is doing a war game against
Generation Z.
Yeah, and they called it the Zebellion. And the things that they're rebelling against are low wages and the poverty gap. And it's like, well, does the U.S. stand for that? I don't.
Anyway, no. The Wall Street Journal, Biden to expand National Security Agency role in government cybersecurity. Could this possibly have anything to do with weakening encryption? I don't know.
Glad to see that they're focused on important things.
Yeah, we had another bipartisan bill, so we had to get all that out of the way so that we can also say this, because the government needs leverage over tech companies in order to get them to do things like modify their application to spy on all Chinese phones.
Senate committee votes to advance major tech antitrust bill.
So the meat and potatoes of this bill is basically if you're Google or Amazon and you do something to interfere with the business of somebody who is using your services, then there's a whole new class of laws.
There's a whole word for it they described in the article.
That you violated. Which
I cannot remember now. But it was like if someone depends on your service and you make it harder for them to use your service, if they're a competitor.
If you make camera bags, for example, and then Amazon says, we think these are counterfeit camera bags. You need to show us who your vendor is and show us that these are not stolen. And you do that, and then Amazon goes to your vendor and says, we would like this exact same specification, and we're going to give you a lot of money. And also don't sell to those other people anymore. That would run afoul of this. That would be not allowed. That would be what we call anti-competitive.
A lot of companies probably falling under this. Also, what a great gesture on the photo. I would draw that. Like, that would look good as an ink drawing.
This is just like, I imagine this is the dialogue here is, so what you're telling me is that your business managers looked at how well this company was doing in the niche of selling camera bags, and you said, you know what, Amazon Basics could definitely get in on camera bags. Is that what you're telling me?
The camera bags story makes me think that you recently looked for a camera bag and then got angry.
No, that's a pretty famous story where...
Oh, wait, yeah. Was it the leather bags?
Yeah, Amazon got caught red-handed doing exactly that, and they were completely shameless about it. So...
Oops, sucks to suck.
Yeah, and there was nothing... Right now, there's not really anything illegal about that. It's not ethical, but it's definitely not illegal.
Which sucks.
Yeah. Well, speaking of not ethical...
Cambodia's internet may soon be like China's, state-controlled.
Again, are you noticing a pattern here in the government stories?
Well, and they make that sound negative, but it's like, well, the EU's kind of wanting to do the same thing, but it was done like it was positive in that story. It's strange how they wrote it differently.
Who controls the narrative? A benevolent dictator or a conniving despot?
It depends on who's elected for that office.
All right. Switching gears to something that's actually good news.
Oh no. California judge rules Google's confidentiality agreements break labor law. This is really good news.
Yeah, so it took a long time. The Google employees identified as John Doe argued that the broad non-disclosure agreement the company asked him to sign barred him from speaking about his job to other potential employers, amounting to a non-compete clause, which are illegal in California. And the California judges agreed. So this is a pretty big slap to Google. There's going to be a lot of other stuff that comes out of this. And so we're going to refer back to this in future episodes.
Apparently, Google was like crazy too. You couldn't talk to your family about stuff that was happening at your office. Like, you couldn't talk to obviously other employers, but just friends, no one.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to talk, even if it was something abusive. Like if you had a problem with the superior and the company wasn't doing anything about it, you weren't allowed to talk to anybody about it.
Also, the discrimination suits and some other things like that. It's really. Do you remember the AIT researcher that was dismissed, Gabru? I think she commented on this too because it's basically saying, you know, the non-disclosure agreements and stuff that were in place protected some of the more privileged inside of the company. Meanwhile, she was fired for her opinion about, you know, a paper that carried disclaimers like, this is not the opinion of Google, this is just what we found from our research.
Right.
It's like, oh, that's an interesting dichotomy. But now it's like, no, those agreements are not enforceable and actually illegal under California law. So it's going to be interesting.
How long before Google's like, all right, we're going to Texas, just like Tesla?
I was thinking about that. I was thinking that I think that's one of the logical outcomes from this. This and a couple other rulings that have been against Google. I think they'll
all just start moving to other states.
The executives have to be seriously considering an exodus from California at this point.
How long before there's a law at the federal level? Probably another 50 years.
Yeah, I think the federal level is pretty well locked up in super PACs and federal donations.
Just sniffing each other's farts.
Yeah, so I don't think we have anything that's going to happen there, sadly. Speaking of, I don't think we're going to have anything that happens there, sadly.
Yeah. This, Fed releases long-awaited study on a digital dollar, but doesn't take a position yet on creating one. This was supposed to be due last summer.
Yeah.
And then they took another 6 months to release it, and they're still kind of like, we don't know what our full position is yet. They're actually getting feedback on it, though.
Yeah, they said we're going to open this up for public feedback, but they go out of their way not to take a position. This was more positive overall than I expected.
Yeah.
One of the things that there are undertones here for is things like welfare and entitlement distributions. And so this correctly points out one of the uses of this may be that the federal dollars that are distributed to people that are in hardship, things like, you imagine things like food stamps or other monetary benefits. This would let the federal government directly distribute those funds to the individual, which would eliminate entire swaths of the bureaucracy. And
companies that just operate trying to get that kind of money.
Yeah, and so it's like 2 lines in the entire report that are like, yeah, we could just distribute the money directly to the citizenry, and it would eliminate all this stuff. And then it stops short of saying, and that would be amazing because it would be so much more efficient. It just says it would be more efficient because there's less overhead, but it doesn't explain, the vast insanity of the overhead of those. I mean, think about like, you worked retail, about the software and the insanity of like, you can buy this but not that on certain kinds of entitlements.
Yeah, like WIC was a pain in the butt. I think they have a card system now, so it's easier. But at the time when I was working as a cashier, it was a literal paper paper check.
Yeah.
And you would have to enter in a bunch of like codes to make it work. And if they got something that was just the wrong size, it was the right brand, right thing, it wouldn't go through, and then you'd have to run back and get it, and it's very annoying.
And the reality is that the privacy on those things is already gone. That's surveilled to the nth degree. They know exactly what you bought on those kind of card systems because of the way it is. It's already there. Using a direct distribution would solve all of that. The only thing that they could find that might be bad for the federal government in that scenario is that they said that it would make the central banks liable, or it would make the federal banks liable, whereas right now the feds hand to smaller banks who then are responsible for getting it from A to B. So if something goes wrong with that, then somebody other than the Fed is responsible. And so they're basically, it's like, we have the money and we distribute the money, but we know that we're never going to be liable for problems because we hand it off to other people who deal with the money and we don't have to worry about it. It's like, well, that's kind of a narrow-minded position to take, but it's also revealing that that's the only thing they could find wrong with it.
So. I watched this is maybe a little heavy for the news, but whatever, we're already kind of depressing. I watched a documentary on YouTube about some of the stuff with Katrina and the disaster response for that.
Yeah.
And it was just layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy, and then it just became like a weird political push and pull.
Yeah, a lot of those stories.
And no one got their stuff because of it.
A lot of those stories are really just Kafka-esque. You know, like Bob froze to death because he was working on page 4 of his, 7-page packet submission thing.
Well, there were like talks about, they call it like the Louisiana Navy, where it was just locals who came to come help, and they got turned away because they're like, oh, we don't need the help. But it was really just administrator oversight. They didn't realize, like that fog of war, they didn't realize what was actually happening. So they thought they had it covered, but they didn't. That's
also happening with vets. There were a lot of vets that were exposed to really bad chemicals.
Yeah.
And because we don't have the stuff in place to deal with it, a lot of vets are not getting health care. They're like, this is definitely not service related. And it's like, oh, it definitely is.
There's so many layers of bureaucracy that you can't actually get seen by anybody.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of layers of bureaucracy.
Bank of Russia calls for full ban on crypto.
They suggest making crypto trading, mining, and usage illegal, but owning it would be okay.
Oh, why the hell would you just own it?
How do you own it and not use it? Is that like Schrodinger's coin?
They just want you to be diamond hands. You're always holding.
Speaking of somebody who's probably also diamond hands.
NYC Mayor Adams will convert his city paycheck to cryptocurrency via Coinbase. I think it was his first 3, right?
Yeah, he said, I'm going to receive cryptocurrency to do this. But it turns out cryptocurrency is not legal tender. So Department of Labor rules mean that he can't. Yeah.
You can't accept coupons for payment. It's not right. But there was the other mayor who was doing it. I think it was Miami. But he was only doing 1. But the New York guy was like, I'll up you. I'll do 3.
The New York guy was trying to alter their infrastructure to do that. But it turns out the Department of Labor will not let you do that.
Which probably for the better.
Yeah. And it's fine. I mean, he can use Coinbase to convert his his
real
fiat
dollars.
currency into crypto. That's totally fine.
That article mentioned some other people like ball players, sports people. Rogers, I think that's a baseball guy. Yeah. Also does that for his money.
They still get paid in cash. They just then
they have to convert it. Yeah.
So speaking of things that aren't real,
Havana syndrome unlikely caused by hostile foreign power, CIA says.
Well, that's not actually what the CIA said. So the CIA investigated this. So what happened is a bunch of people got mysteriously sick, and then a lot more people, to the tune of something like 1,000, said, hey, I've been having mysterious illnesses too, and I work in the same kind of sector as these people that got sick. What's going on? So the CIA has investigated this 1,000-ish cases, and there are 12 that are unexplainable, but the other ones are attributable to environmental causes, stress, other underlying health conditions, or anything like that.
My favorite one of those is environmental, though, because it's like, well, what in the environment? And it's never specified in the article what they mean by that.
It turns out that Bob's cube was right next to the office microwave. So he was sitting inches away from a microwave through a drywall and pine wall. And it was a leaky microwave. Sorry, Bob.
He could the worst part was that he could just smell his coworkers' tuna every day when they were microwaving it for some reason.
No matter what you're cooking, it always smells like burritos. It's
terrible.
Like, that's the smell of your own brain cooking, Bob. I'm sorry. Oh, that's kind of dark.
But he can't hear it.
But this is a feel-good story. We've got an amazing robot feel-good story.
Rescuers save dog from drowning with a sausage and a drone.
So the story here is there was a dog that was trapped on a sandbar or something like that when the tide was coming in, and it was too stupid to know which way the tide was going to come in, and it was too dangerous for somebody to go and get the dog. So they got a drone, and they put a sausage on the drone, and they used the drone with the sausage to lure the dog to somewhere that would be safe.
I love that. I love it. I'm confused why, like, yelling at the dog didn't have it come back, because, like, Rue's pretty stupid, but if you yell for her, she generally comes back.
Just didn't want to come back.
Yeah, he was like, nah, I'm going to keep out here on this sandbar.
The owners were there, and they were able to assist. And at one point, the dog actually did catch the sausage on the drone, and they thought it was going to pull. They thought the dog was going to pull
it out of the sky.
So,
but they got it back up, and he's safe and sound now.
Yay, what a feel-good story.
Yeah, ignore all those sad stories about the internet becoming more and more closed off. Oh, there's a picture of him. Just ignore all the sadness and look at that happy picture of that dog.
He looks so, like, I just had a brush with death. He
Yeah,
doesn't appreciate it.
He looks like he was cold. Now he's, like, warming up again.
All right, what do we got for business? We got a big business section.
I think it's all business, right?
We'll probably have business in one other section. And then Friday... We've got like 18 nonsense stories.
The smorgasbord of other stuff that doesn't get mentioned.
It's crazy.
So,
All right. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.